im se svima, i malima i velikima, i bogatima i siromašnima, i slobodnjacima i robovima, dade žig na njihovu desnu ruku ili na čela njihova, te da nitko ne može ništa kupiti ili prodati.
Pozdrav dragi narode, dobrodošli u još jednu epizodu Slobodni. Komarci, vjerovali ne, danas je to naša tema. Naime, da li su komarci tu onako kako ih je priroda stvorila i da li se mogu koristiti u još neke svrhe uz intervenciju čovjeka? Svjedočili smo naravno i u Zagrebu da smo imali puštanje komaraca sa svrhom da se istrijebe oni koji nas pikaju. Ali gdje pitati? Gdje postoji stručnjaci? Zato smo danas na Hawaiima. Današnja moja gošća je stručnjak upravo u tom dijelu jer tamo se događaju puno ozbiljnije intervencije u prirodu putem projekta sa komarcima, ali najbolje je da vam sve danas i sami prezentiramo. Od sada nadalje ćemo razgovarati na engleskom jeziku. Aloha Tina! Welcome to our show in Croatia.
Thank you for having me.
Please, can you say a few words about yourself and about your work for our audience in Croatia?
Yes, I'm Tina Lia. I'm the founder and president of the environmental nonprofit Hawaii Unites, and we are challenging the mosquito release experiment on Maui. That is our focus right now, and so I'm looking forward to sharing information about that with your audience.
Can you briefly explain us what exactly is happening right now in Hawaii? What is the project? And why are you now trying to make some legal attempts according to that?
So our state of Hawaii and their multi-agency partnership are wanting to release up to 40 billion of these lab-altered mosquitoes a year on Maui, and they also want to expand the project to other islands, and they're working on additional mosquito release projects for human health. But this project is for, they want to suppress the southern house mosquito population that is transmitting avian malaria to the endangered and threatened native birds in our forest area. And that is what the project is about, but we have a lot of concerns that I would like to talk about here.
What are the risks of letting mosquitoes in our environment?
Well, the mosquitoes are invasive, so once they bring them in, this can be an irreversible situation. And they are also using a technique where these mosquitoes have been infected with a bacteria called Wolbachia. And this bacteria, we have peer-reviewed studies showing that it can cause mosquitoes to have increased pathogen infection. And so they can become more capable of transmitting certain diseases. And that includes the avian malaria, which is supposed to be the intent of the project. So it actually could further endanger the birds and even cause their extinction. And it also includes West Nile virus, which affects birds and humans as well. So those are some of our concerns with this technology that they're using.
And who is standing behind this project, and why you think that that your government is in the conflict of interest?
So one of the lead agencies for this project is our Department of Land and Natural Resources for our state of Hawaii. And they proposed the project, so they presented the proposal, and then their own Board of Land and Natural Resources had the final say in voting to approve that project. And then it turns out that that Department of Land and Natural Resources has a laboratory, and they've been funded, and we don't know who has funded this laboratory to build out an insectary where they're planning to mass produce the mosquitoes to release on the island. So that is a clear conflict of interest.
And it seems so that there is a lack of transparency in this.
Definitely. There's a lot of secrecy, and there's also information being presented to the public that when we look through the agency's own documents is not the accurate information. And so we have a lot of concerns about that, and that they have not studied the risks of this project, that we've presented very solid information. I'm working with a tropical disease and vector expert on this island who has decades of experience, and he has brought a lot of these concerns to our attention in these peer-reviewed studies. And so them not wanting to look at that, it does raise questions about whether they're actually concerned about what could happen here, or they want to just rush it through because of these financial interests that they have.
What are the dangers for animal world in this project?
So one of the things that is an issue is that female mosquitoes will be released unintentionally. The project is supposed to only release the males, and those would be infected with this bacteria strain that's different from the females here. And so when they mate, they would cause the offspring not to survive. But females will be released as well because the sorting process is imperfect. And so those females bite and breed and spread disease. And as I said earlier, the peer-reviewed studies are showing that they may become capable of spreading diseases, including that avian malaria, which is the issue with the birds right now. That is what they're saying is causing the birds to be threatened. And so we want to know why they wouldn't have studied that ahead of time. And also, these same southern house mosquitoes transmit avian pox, which could be a risk to the birds. And they transmit other diseases to animals. The West Nile virus, again, the birds can get, other animals can get. Heartworm that dogs can get, and other animals as well. Western equine encephalitis. There's a number of things that could affect the wildlife here with this project. So we want to know why wouldn't they have looked at that, especially with the birds, to make sure it's not going to make things worse rather than better.
How many mosquitoes, female mosquitoes, came up from one female that is allowed? And as I understand, it's allowed, it will come around 3,000 of them. And from one, how many can develop a nest?
Right. So they are allowed to, per our Environmental Protection Agency guidelines, they're allowed to release over 3,000 of these females accidentally per week. And each female in her 8-week lifespan can produce another 160,000 more females through the breeding of the generations. And so, as you can imagine, that could be a tremendous amount of female mosquitoes that bite and breed and spread disease. And, they'll be continually releasing. So there would be overlapping amounts potentially. And it could also cause the population of mosquitoes to be replaced because those mosquitoes would be compatible with the males that are released and they could breed.
Can you explain what this means by replacing these existing mosquitoes?
Yeah, so what that means is that if the mosquitoes are able to mate, so that would be either the accidentally released females from the lab that have the same strain as the males that are released, or this strain of bacteria actually possibly, which another thing they haven't studied, could transmit to the wild mosquitoes here horizontally, which means through the feeding sites and the mating potentially. And so if they're able to breed, then it might turn out that this lab strain of the mosquito replaces the population of wild mosquitoes. So now we have the lab strain mosquitoes instead. And in Singapore, they found that when they did this technique, just 3 females accidentally released caused the population to be replaced. So now instead of the wild mosquitoes that they had, now they have a whole new population of mosquitoes that have this lab strain of the bacteria that we don't know if it can cause them to be more capable of spreading diseases. We don't know what the effects of that might be.
From just 3, they replace whole population.
Yes.
Interesting. And now it's the most important thing. What is danger for human health or for any kind of human activities?
So for the humans, we're concerned again about the disease transmission, the West Nile virus that humans can get, that they may become more capable of transmitting because of this Wolbachia bacteria. And again, they have not studied to make sure that won't happen. And these southern house mosquitoes also transmit other human diseases, including elephantiasis and St. Louis encephalitis, Western equine encephalitis. They are a potential vector of Zika virus. And what is very concerning is that we have no information on what pathogens they're screening the mosquitoes for. And we did what's called a FOIA request, that's a Freedom of Information Act request to the EPA, where these mosquitoes were approved for usage, seeking those documents that show what pathogens they're being screened for, because that was not disclosed to the public. And we were denied those documents and told that they are confidential and they won't be disclosing them. So we don't even know what diseases they're being screened for. And even if they release only males, which they won't, they will accidentally release females. It's inevitable, and that's in their own, information. Even if they only released males, males can transmit pathogens to females through the mating. So, this could cause the females to now have pathogens, diseases that we don't even know what might be brought over here.
Is there any similar project anywhere in the world where they can collect information or experience, or this is the pilot project?
This project on Maui is a pilot project experiment, and that's another thing that they're not presenting to the public. They're telling them that it's been done safely all over the world, and that's not true. So the southern house mosquito that they're using, that species of mosquito has never been used before with this Wolbachia. It's called incompatible insect technique, IIT. And that's where they infect the mosquitoes in the lab with the incompatible Wolbachia strain so that they are not able to reproduce with the females here with the different strain. This Wolbachia IIT has never been done before with southern house mosquitoes for standalone field release, as they're doing here. And the project area here in East Maui is the largest ever globally to date of any kind with Wolbachia mosquitoes of any kind. So that is another experimental aspect of it. And it's also never been used for conservation purposes, the mosquitoes. They are generally used to target human disease, which is something else that they are doing separately in conjunction with this project and not giving information to the public about. But this project with the avian malaria with the southern house mosquitoes is an experiment. It has never been done before anywhere in the world.
Can you explain how large is this area of Maui? How many inhabitants there?
It is 64,666 acres, the project area where they're releasing the mosquitoes. And it covers conservation areas and reserves, natural reserves. There are endangered species that could be affected, including the birds, but, insects and the Hawaiian hoary bat, the damselflies. And so we're really alarmed that they haven't taken a look at all of the risks that could happen, and these peer-reviewed studies and these things that we've brought repeatedly to their attention about what could happen in that project area, which is enormous, 64,666 acres. It is a huge section of the island.
And according your information, what could be the worst case scenario in this thing?
I would say the worst case scenario is that we end up with a new type of mosquito that's more capable of transmitting diseases to the birds, the animals, humans, all of the above, one or the other. It could cause extinction of the birds. If we were going to say worst case scenario, it causes extinction of the birds, and that causes changes in the environment because the birds are pollinators, and so that could affect the plants and the flow of the water up there. Our watersheds are up there. This could affect the other insects up there, pollinating insects and the endangered insects. And again, it could affect humans. So worst case scenario, they've unleashed an irreversible bacteria once it's in our environment in these mosquitoes. They may replace the mosquitoes with ones that are going to be more able to spread disease, and they could cause extinction of birds, other animals, that are endangered up there, insects, and they can cause disease and even death in humans by doing this.
And let's say if they succeed, for sure, they're saying they have good intentions. And what are the intentions? What could be the best case scenario if they succeed according to their plans?
I think that they're hoping, a lot of these agencies are hoping that this will be successful and it will suppress the mosquito population and that will cause a reduction in the transmission of avian malaria, which will cause the population of the threatened and endangered birds to rebound or, stay stable at least. And so they're hoping for that scenario. But again, they really should have made sure to have mitigation plans in place, biosecurity protocols, pathogen screenings, these scientific tests done to make sure that something awful doesn't happen, that they're not intending to happen. But yes, that's their intention, is to save the birds. That is the whole point of the plan.
Yeah, well, you're mentioning word hope or hoping. And as my experience says that world hope is usually going with religion, not with the science. And I have to remember something what happening just a few months ago when they were hearing in front of Congress of Rachel Walensky concerning the vaccine's efficacy. And when they asked her, in a moment when you said that vaccine will stop spreading a virus, are you sure that it was the truth, or you had the information that this vaccine was not tested for stopping spreading viruses? And she says, we were all hoping that will stop transmitting. And now I see the same pattern here. But okay, maybe it's just wrong connection. Can you tell us what is the difference between these mosquitoes and genetically modified mosquitoes?
Yeah, the genetically modified mosquitoes are a different technology where they change the genetics so that the mosquitoes, again, are not able to reproduce. It has to do with a protein that they overproduce, and they are, labeled as such, genetically modified. Those are the ones that come from a company called Oxitec. That's what's used around the world. And so these mosquitoes, they want to really make the point that they're not genetically modified, the Wolbachia IIT mosquitoes, but they are lab altered. There are genetics involved, and that's not really the point of what we're concerned about, but they do make a big point of that. And it's important to mention that because a lot of times these projects get pushed through, not just here, but other places around the world, and they tell everybody, well, this isn't the genetically modified mosquitoes, this is, this safe bacteria that's all around us and everything. And we really want to make sure people know we've done a lot of research on this. it can't be said that it's safe without looking at all of these things that could happen. But yes, the genetically modified mosquitoes and the Wolbachia mosquitoes, and there are other kinds of mosquitoes that are used around the world, and they sometimes are released both in certain states here in the U.S. and in different countries, and they may try both methods or additional methods, because there are at least a couple of more that we could talk about, including the one they're planning to use in Croatia, from what I understand, from what I was able to research on that.
Well, I cannot imagine how they are releasing these mosquitoes. I ask him this question because I want to see, is there any way to control not to have these genetically modified mosquitoes together with other Wolbachia mosquitoes, as you mentioned? How they are releasing in the environment?
So mostly they will be releasing using drones here in this huge project area, and they want to use up to 134 drone flights a week, which is another issue with the wildlife and the birds, that it may actually disrupt their breeding and their nesting and their communications with each other and cause stress to them, and could also, even per their own documents that they use to approve this project, a drone might inadvertently fly into a flock of birds. It's so against what is natural and good for that environment for the birds. But yes, mostly they're using drones, and from what we can see, even though they're saying that these are commercial drones, they look like military sized drones, and they're going to have to be flown by licensed drone operators, and up to 134 again flights per week for the next at least 20 years, according to their documents, in this natural area. They'll also be using helicopters, and they will be using ground release, so people brought by helicopter to certain remote areas and releasing them on the ground. And there will be packaging involved, which, we also take issue with, because we're an environmental organization and they have not been clear about how long that packaging might remain in the environment, especially when they're releasing so many flights per week with so many mosquitoes for at least 20 years. We just don't even know what that might look like.
Let's repeat, 130 flights per week for additional 20 years.
Yes, 134, up to 134 drone flights per week for likely at least the next 20 years in this natural reserve and conservation and endangered species area. Beautiful forest where, there are areas where people go in the forest, and the noise, even the noise situation, and they mention it repeatedly in their document that they approved to put this through, just how much of a noise disturbance it will be. And, you can imagine, this is a reserve area where we go for quiet and to be with nature and to listen to the birds. And now us and the birds and the other wildlife get to hear drones for, all week long during the weekdays, during the daylight hours for 20 years. How is this an environmental project?
To me, it looks like a pilot project, but for testing on humans without informed consent. That reminds me of something. Well, they are now testing something in real time, in a real area, on real people, and it seems so that these people didn't know or don't know what is happening and what can be impact on them.
Yes, you're right. There are a lot of parallels with this project, with things that have happened in the last 3+ years, as far as them telling us it's safe and effective, and their scientists have all the answers. And if we have questions and concerns, and again, a tropical disease expert who has, authored over 40 peer-reviewed studies on mosquito-borne illness, primarily malaria, and has been the go-to person for mosquito-borne illness on these islands for over 20 years. his opinion is no longer considered, and only their scientists have the answers. And, you know, the public's opinion doesn't matter, even though, as you say, we should be giving our informed consent for this to move forward, since these mosquitoes potentially can affect us and our bodies and our bodily autonomy. And so it's not okay. And you're absolutely right. There are a lot of parallels to what happened, you know, previously and is continuing to happen with health issues. And this is a health issue.
Maybe there is a more parallel. Tell me, according to your knowledge, who is financing these projects? There is some kind, maybe environmental activists, or maybe some philanthropic foundations.
Yes, we're still looking to see what private funding and grant funding is connected to this current project. So at this point right now, what we know is that our federal government here in the United States, our Department of the Interior, is funding over $30 million for the project. And they have tied that into our climate and our natural resources and our Native Hawaiian culture here. And so a lot of that is done very cleverly to where that funding is tied to this project in a way where, you know, people may want to support because of that. But we also did find, because a lot of people were concerned when you say mosquitoes, everyone thinks of Bill Gates. And so there were a lot of questions about that. And we did research to see if there was a connection on that, which, you know, at this point, we can't say that he's directly funding this part of the project, but we do know that his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funded initial research and development of the technology for these mosquitoes with one of the labs that's providing the mosquitoes. And we also know that the other lab, it's called Verily Life Sciences. It's a subsidiary of Google's parent company, Alphabet. And so this is all very much tied into biotechnology and experimentation and corporate experiments. And we also looked for connections there with some big names, and we did find that George Soros and his Soros Fund is very heavily invested in that Alphabet parent company of the mosquito lab, Verily Life Sciences.
It seems to that always the same people are really looking to take care of our health on a lot of special ways, and we have to take them for it. Because really I never thought that people that has so much money really are so worried about health of the whole humanity, especially for humanity. This is my comment, that they think there are too many of us in this world. But that's another subject. I have to ask you also because, well, whole world is connected. And that's how we, for Croatia, came to Hawaii to ask you about this. There was also a project in Croatia just 1.5 months ago when they released, I think, 100,000 mosquitoes here. And they had a purpose to this extinct all present tiger mosquitoes who are biting people. And what do you know about this kind of technology?
Yeah, so this one, I did look into what has been presented about what's being released in Croatia. So I can't say if there might be other things going on as well, because as you know, here in Hawaii, what's being presented isn't the whole story, and there are other things going on with the mosquitoes. But what I did see that they're willing to share with the public about that project in Croatia is that they're using something called the sterile insect technique. And that's where they irradiate the mosquitoes in the lab using gamma rays. And that causes them to be sterile, and then they release them in a similar way to mate with the existing mosquitoes so that they won't be able to reproduce. And so that would be the intent of suppressing the mosquito population. And it's the Asian tiger mosquito. That's the Aedes albopictus, which we also have over here on Maui. And that's something, that mosquito is another one that this parallel project that our Department of Health is running is going to be bringing in. But we don't know, exactly what they're planning to do there. That would be with the Wolbachia bacteria. But where you are, they're, presenting that they're using the sterile insect technique, the irradiation of the mosquitoes to sterilize them before they release them. And, there could be other issues tied to that with females being released, although they would be irradiated too, likely. So, it might not be some of the same concerns because they may be sterilized to a certain extent as well. But one of the things that I do want to say about that is that I noticed in the article that I read that a lot of the way that they present this was very similar. They talked about global warming and how that is causing the disease to increase, and that's why they need to, target. and they're talking about how this technology has been done safely and it's working everywhere all over the world. And actually, this sterile insect technique, if you look at the World Mosquito Program website, which is, Bill Gates it loves the World Mosquito Program, and you can actually find a lot of really useful information on there, including charts of the different techniques, and you can compare, different aspects of them. But this sterile insect technique, similar to how what's happening here with the Wolbachia mosquitoes, you have to release a lot of them and you have to continuously do it, and it can be costly. And so my question would be, who made these decisions and what might they have been invested in, and what might be the agenda there?
And according to your knowledge, is there any long-term studies with this sterile insect technique? Are we have this long-term investigation on information, or this is something also new?
No, actually, the sterile insect technique is one of the ones, I would say it's probably the one that's been around the longest. It's been around for decades. They've been doing this with different, ways of irradiating the mosquitoes. So you could probably find a lot of studies that would explain more about how that works. And they could probably say, this has been done for, I don't know, I think they say 70 plus years or something with the sterile insect technique, because initially they were trying to call this Wolbachia mosquito technique over here a form of the sterile insect technique, even though it's not at all a form of that technique. But yeah, the irradiation is the one they've been doing for a very long time. So you could probably find a lot of studies about that. But again, I don't know the specifics of that project there. I would want to get a lot more details, because sometimes they present things one way and they're actually doing different things to try something else, or do different techniques together at times. They do mix this Wolbachia IIT technique with the sterile insect technique sometimes, and they might use this release of the sterile insect technique mosquitoes to open the door to other technologies. And, are they necessarily going to tell the public when that's happening? So I would definitely keep an eye on that and try to find out as much information as possible about the agencies involved and the companies involved and the labs involved, and the details, if you can, about the process of manufacturing those mosquitoes.
Let's imagine that you are a citizen of Croatian capital city, Zagreb. What would you ask our mayor about this project? What documents would you look for, and what main questions you would like to get answers?
I would want to see the contracts with the lab or labs providing the mosquitoes. I would want to see all of the funding sources and who in the decision-making agencies might be connected to those funding sources. And I would want to see the manufacturing process for the mosquitoes, including the pathogen screenings. And that's something that with our Freedom of Information Act FOIA request here, we were denied that information. So I would ask your mayor about making sure there's transparency with the public, with with all aspects of the project, because this is such a serious thing to have potential disease vectors released. And if the public has not agreed to it, that's not right. So yeah, I would want to see as much detail about those mosquitoes and, about what led to the decision to do this, because that's part of what we found here too, was that there was a whole history of plans being put in place for at least the last 6 years to do this project. And so something similar might have taken place there. And I would just want to know the details of the timeline of the decision making and everything possible about those mosquitoes and the labs providing. Why did they choose that method, as opposed to other methods? Where's the data on the crisis that caused this to need to happen? Because we're finding that we're not being given the data to say that even the reason that they're doing this can be justified necessarily.
Well, I would like also to know answers on these questions, and also maybe it's a stupid comparison, but we are fighting against mosquitoes for already, as you said, 70 years. We are fighting against flu already how many years with vaccines, and there is a still present flu. Vaccines are still, mosquitoes are still present. I don't know if this a fight without end. But okay, that's just my comment. Tell me, I read it, the article that FDA approved one new project where they are trying to testing how to vaccinate people against malaria through mosquitoes, genetically modified mosquitoes. What do you know about this?
Yes, I have been reading about that too, and there's been some information on that for a little while now, but it's becoming more in the public. A lot of talk about mosquitoes is in the news for a lot of different reasons, but yes, they are experimenting with using the mosquitoes to intentionally infect people with human malaria. And it's a modified form, I guess, of the malaria that would not make them as sick, but would help their body to build immunity, which, whether or not any of that is, true, good science, I don't know. But just the implication that mosquitoes may be used for that purpose. And then with, these agencies not being completely clear with the public and truthful about what they're doing and being secretive about some of these projects, we do have to be concerned. What might they do something like that? Might they say we're bringing in mosquitoes to address mosquitoes of human health concern, or to, the Department of Health is bringing in mosquitoes? Well, who's to say they're even going to ask the public before they try some shenanigans like that? I don't know. But we have to be worried about it. But for sure, it's an issue, and it's really happening. It sounds pretty out there, but these are documented studies, and they are proudly discussing, that there's thousands of flying syringes or whatever the scientists from that project said. It's pretty alarming.
Is there any connection? I read it also, article, when they said that after a long time there was in Florida new cases of malaria, and that, of course, when we read it this first time after a long time, and then at the same time we have an article who's saying that they are trying to implement technology where through mosquitoes they want to vaccine people against malaria, and now we have malaria new cases. Is there any connection there? Proof connection?
I don't know that there's a provable connection, but there is some science that could be of concern with what may have happened there. I do know that the mosquito species that transmits avian malaria is a different mosquito. It's called the Anopheles, and that is not the same mosquito that they usually release with these genetically modified or Wolbachia mosquitoes. That's usually the Aedes mosquitoes, Aedes aegypti. possibly this Aedes albopictus is released as well, but not the Anopheles. So that's where I would say we would need more information on what happened in those states. It's actually in Florida and Texas here in the United States where they had these human malaria cases. And the thing that made this stand out is that they were acquired locally as opposed to somebody brought the malaria in from another country or area, so that's part of why people are alarmed, especially when, all this information is coming out about mosquitoes, to vaccinate mosquitoes for bioweaponry, which has been going on for many, many years, but is now really in the news. But there's some things that could have happened with the science of releasing mosquitoes, even a different species that could have caused those Anopheles mosquitoes to have a population surge or, even be more capable of transmitting disease. We don't know. I would say that should definitely be studied. And I also, I want to point out one thing about that. Texas and Florida, they released the genetically modified mosquitoes and these Wolbachia mosquitoes in both of those states. And the project areas were the largest ever to date that were documented. And that information was withheld from the public in the documents used to push this project through in Hawaii. And that is one thing that we did get in the FOIA documents. The very little bit of documents that they gave us showed that they had withheld the information about those two states. So that certainly stands out. I think we need to know a lot more about what happened there in Texas and Florida and how it could relate to what's going on with, the human malaria, maybe other diseases. A lot of talk is going on about this right now.
It seems so that lack of transparency is the biggest reason of your concerns here. Can you tell us about your activities, about your agency that you are running? What is your goals? What are you doing there? And what other projects you have?
So we are an environmental nonprofit, and we are dedicated to conservation and protection of our natural environment and our resources and our natural world. And so, this is our main focus, this project, because they are really pushing from all different angles, first this island, then the next island, and then, first the bird, the mosquitoes to combat the avian malaria. Now they're doing this public health project that they're not telling us anything about. But we are, definitely wanting to focus as we move forward on other pollutants to the environment, and particularly this biotechnology. So I would say that's the focus we're going in with this, and these mosquitoes are part of that. And the bigger picture plan with these mosquitoes is very much tied to what I would call biotech pollution of our environment, where they want to release synthetic biology and CRISPR technology and do these corporate experimentations in our natural world and where we live and breathe. And, we have not consented as humans, and the animals have not consented. They're being experimented on. So that's what we're looking at, is to protect the natural world from biotech takeover and genetically modified organisms that, once they come in, they take over. And we don't want that. We want a natural world. We want a natural environment for our wildlife and these birds that we want to protect and honor. So that's what we're very much focused on right now. And that's why this mosquito project is at the forefront of that, because it speaks to all of that, especially with now we find out where they're going with it. It's even worse than what we're looking at now. But what's happening now is pretty bad too.
Are you familiar who is and are they producing these genetically modified organisms, and who are there and where they are producing? Is there any country that is allowed to do it without any control? Possible, of course.
Where they're producing the Oxitec mosquitoes, they're based in the UK. I can't say that that's the only place they're producing them, though, because we're finding that there's a lot of lab activity going on, even tied to the project here that's happening on the mainland in other states through the universities. That's something I would look at there in Europe, as well as what is going on in the universities with some of this technology, genetic modification, mosquito, lab altered mosquitoes, and all the different ways that they're looking to do that moving forward. So I do know that the genetically modified one, specifically mosquitoes, is based out of UK, but I don't know if they may have other labs around the world as well. And here, they are, producing the mosquitoes on these two labs that I mentioned on the mainland, which are in Kentucky and San Francisco, California. But they're also doing work with the mosquitoes and the genetic modification potential, it sounds like, might be happening here, where they're looking at that research, and also at the University of California in San Diego. So I guess the answer is we don't know what's going on in these labs and where this activity might be happening, and what other labs might be, we not be aware of, even right here in our own home area, in our state, locally. We should know that. Those are things that should not be hidden from the public.
Well, we don't know, and we have to ask questions. Can you tell us, for the wrap up for the end, for people who want to support your work, who want to support what you are doing to protect the environment, to ask a question about these important topics, because whole nature is connected. And whatever happened in one micro region, that can go somewhere else. And if anything goes wrong, then we can experience some serious consequences for long-term future. How can they support your work?
Yes, so we have a website, Hawaii Unites, with an S, hawaiiunites.org, and we have all the information about this project on there, including the documentation from these agencies and the peer-reviewed studies, lots of information about the project, which does affect everybody around the world. If we filed this legal action, if we can stop this here, we may be able to stop it from moving forward to the next place where you are, and it's all connected, as you said. Our environment's connected, these things happening in different places in similar ways is connected. And so what we're asking the public to do is to help us keep this legal case going. It's so important that we can fight this, continue in court to present this information that we have, to get everything on the record, and to seek a ruling to stop this, and to make sure that they have tested everything and done the studies that should have been done in the first place. So hawaiiunites.org/donate. If you could please donate to our organization, and so that we can continue to navigate this legal case, which will affect potentially globally how this moves forward. hawaiiunites.org/donate.
Thank you, Tina. It was really a pleasure. Aloha to Hawaii and to all your people who are really now fighting hard to protect the environment and to get really questions what are necessary, especially with this experience what we had in last 3 years. We need questions, we need proof, not to become again some kind of lab rats without informed consent for some better purposes who can get wrong in any way.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to share this information with the global audience. And also, please let me know what you find out about what's going on over there in Croatia and in Europe with the mosquito releases. We want to share information with each other and help each other with this. So I would like to know more as you move forward.
I will, for sure. Thank you. Evo, dragi narode, možda vam je ova tema sad strana, ali evo kad malo pogledamo, spominjemo opet iste ljude koji financiraju neke projekte koji nisu transparentni, ne daju odgovore na pitanja koja tražimo, ne rade studije istraživanja, ne znaju koje su dugoročne posljedice, traže da im vjerujemo. Ti isti ljudi se brinu o našem zdravlju puno više nego mi sami. I na kraju, što može poći po krivu? Ako gospodin Gates, gospodin Soros ili Wellcome Trust ili i ostali koje poznajemo, njihova imena poznajemo iz prethodnih razdoblja, ako su oni uključeni u financiranje nekog projekta koji se testira na ljudima, smatram da stvarno nemamo ni jedan razlog za sumnjati da će sve biti u redu i da će to biti isključivo za našu dobrobit. Još pri tome, naravno, ako dodamo da naš gradonačelnik, koji svi znamo dolazi iz istog miljea, jer su i njegov dolazak na vlast u Hrvatsku financirali isti izvori, kada on još donese nama 100.000 komaraca u Hrvatsku, to je sigurna potvrda da ništa ne može poći po zlu. Malo sam sarkastičan, ali nužno je, jer susrećemo se sa istim obrascima, kao što mi jedan čovjek kojeg cijenim kaže, najvažnije je u životu prepoznati obrasce. Ako prepoznate obrasce, možete i anticipirati što će se dogoditi u budućnosti. Nadam se da ste bili zadovoljni sa ovom emisijom, sa gošćom i sa temom. Hvala vam što nas pratite, hvala vam na vremenu i strpljenju. Ako nas podržavate i ako vam je na neki način stalo do ovoga da nastavimo, podržite nas malo, počastite nas kavicom, dobro će nam doći, a mi ćemo i dalje nastavljati otvarati teme koje nitko ne otara. Hvala lijepo još jedanput i vidimo se u idućoj epizodi.
Nitko vas neće natjerati da se poklonite zvijeri, učinit ćete to svoje voljom, odbacujući vjeru. Bićete laka meta za zvijeri, jer se niste podredili vjeri. Ako se ne podredite vjeri, podredit ćete se zvijeri. Toliko ćete se suobličiti sa ovim svijetom, da nećete ni prepoznati da ste u zabludi. Biće to najveća demonska prevara ikada i pravedno zaslužena osuda nad nepokajanim grešnicima.
Gdje su svi oni